Is the US on the brink of an energy disaster? For decades, the United States has relied on one major factor to maintain energy security: Canadian oil. It has always been reliable, abundant, and consistently flowing across the border to keep America's energy supply stable, but that might be about to change forever. A massive shift is unfolding, one that few saw coming. Canada is making a move that could shake the foundations of US energy security, sending gas prices soaring, disrupting supply chains, and triggering an economic crisis unlike anything seen before. So how did we get here? And is there a way to stop this potential disaster before it's too late? Let's break it all down. The brewing conflict? This crisis didn't happen overnight. It has been in the making for months. Tensions began to escalate when the US government imposed heavy tariffs on key Canadian exports, including steel, aluminum, and even automobile goods. The message from Washington was clear. The US was putting America first, even if it meant straining relations with its closest trading partner. But Canada wasn't about to take the hit without a response. And their response isn't just talk, it's a direct and potentially devastating economic counterstrike. The Canadian government is now considering cutting off its most valuable export to the US, crude oil. And this isn't just a symbolic act of retaliation, it's a direct economic weapon. If Canada follows through, the consequences will be swift, severe, and impossible to ignore. How much does the US rely on Canadian oil? Many Americans don't realize just how dependent their country is on Canadian crude. The numbers paint a stark picture. Canada supplies 60% of all US crude oil imports, far more than the Middle East, Latin America, or any other source. US refineries are built specifically to process Canadian heavy crude, meaning finding a replacement wouldn't just be difficult, it would require an overhaul of the refining infrastructure. Unlike oil from OPEC nations, Canadian oil has always been more affordable, stable, and geopolitically safe. Losing access to Canadian oil wouldn't just be a minor setback, it would be a full-blown energy crisis, and the US is woefully unprepared for it. What happens if Canada shuts off the oil supply? If Canada actually follows through on its threat, the impact will be instant and brutal. Gas prices? Expect them to skyrocket almost overnight. Refineries? Many in the US wouldn't be able to function properly without Canadian crude. The economy? The ripple effect would be massive, hitting transportation, manufacturing, and supply chains across the country. And the worst part, there's no easy solution. For years, American leaders assumed that Canada needed the US more than the other way around. They believed Canada had no choice but to sell its oil to the US. But that assumption is crumbling fast. Canada has other options. New trade deals with Asia and Europe are already in the works. If the US doesn't act quickly, Canada might decide to shift its exports permanently, leaving America scrambling for alternatives. Why would Canada risk losing its biggest buyer? At first glance, cutting off oil to the US might seem like a risky move for Canada. After all, the US is its largest customer. But a deeper look shows that Canada might actually stand to gain from this move. For years, Canada has been forced to sell its oil at a discount because its infrastructure was built to send crude south to the US. But with global demand for oil rising, Canada sees an opportunity to break free from US dependence. By shifting its oil exports to Asia and Europe, Canada could actually sell at higher prices and diversify its trade partnerships. In other words, this isn't just a retaliatory strike, it's a strategic pivot toward greater global independence. Can the US replace Canadian oil? Losing Canadian crude isn't just about losing a major supplier, it's about losing a type of oil that the US infrastructure is specifically designed to handle. Finding a replacement isn't as easy as just buying from another country. Here's why. Increased domestic production won't be enough. The US is already producing oil near maximum capacity. Ramping it up would take months, if not years. American oil is lighter crude, while refineries are set up to process Canadian heavy crude. Retooling refineries to handle different oil types would be extremely costly and time-consuming. Other suppliers can't fill the gap. OPEC nations are already struggling to meet global demand. Venezuela's oil industry is in shambles due to years of mismanagement and sanctions. Saudi Arabia has the capacity, but restructuring trade deals and transportation routes would take years. The US Strategic Petroleum Reserve isn't what it used to be. The US has already drained a large portion of its reserves to combat past price surges. Even if it taps into what's left, it's only a temporary solution. The bottom line? There's no quick fix. If Canada shuts off the oil supply, the US will be forced into desperate measures, and the world will be watching closely. Political fallout in Washington. This crisis isn't just an economic disaster, it's a political nightmare. The White House is scrambling, with officials racing to find diplomatic solutions before things spiral out of control. Public pressure is mounting, gas prices are already rising, and Americans are feeling the squeeze at the pump. Congress is in chaos, with lawmakers pointing fingers and blaming each other for allowing relations with Canada to deteriorate. Some are demanding immediate tariff rollbacks to ease tensions, while others insist that the US must stand firm, even if it means economic pain. Energy analysts are sounding the alarm. The longer this crisis drags on, the harder it will be to reverse course. Investor confidence is plummeting, global markets are rattled, and with an election year approaching, this couldn't have come at a worse time for US leaders. So can the US reverse course before it's too late? The three possible outcomes. Right now, there are three ways this crisis could unfold. Canada follows through and cuts off oil completely. If this happens, the US will be forced to scramble for alternatives while gas prices surge worldwide. A last-minute deal is reached. The US could negotiate a trade compromise to prevent disaster, but would Canada agree? And if so, what concessions would Washington have to make? The crisis escalates into a full-scale trade war. If both sides dig in their heels, this conflict could spiral into a long-term economic battle that destabilizes global markets for years. Right now, no one knows which path this will take. But one thing is absolutely certain, the US is facing an energy crisis unlike any before. The global ripple effect. This isn't just a US-Canada issue anymore. The entire global economy is now at risk. Oil markets are on edge. The mere threat of losing Canadian oil has already caused price volatility. If the supply is actually cut off, expect full-blown panic. Europe is watching nervously. With energy shortages already causing major disruptions, the last thing Europe needs is another crisis. If Canadian oil is redirected away from the US, European buyers could step in, driving prices even higher. China and India are making moves. Both nations rely heavily on stable energy supplies. If Canada pivots away from the US, China and India could lock in long-term deals, further tightening global oil availability. Investors are betting on chaos. As soon as the crisis hit, oil futures spiked. Every news update sends markets into a frenzy, with speculation pushing prices higher and higher. The final countdown. So how does this end? Right now, time is running out. Every day that passes brings the US closer to an energy disaster that could reshape global markets for years to come. If Washington and Ottawa can't find common ground, the consequences will be felt not just in America and Canada, but across the entire world. This isn't just a supply issue, it's a ticking time bomb. And unless a solution is found fast, the global economy could be headed for a crisis unlike anything we've ever seen.